Well, hello and welcome back. We are on lesson 22. Self-honesty is the greatest act of love. Super excited about this chapter because I really think that one of the things as we go through this process, this awakening process, is this idea of being just honest with ourselves. And sometimes for some of us, that can be pretty scary, but it's an incredible, worthwhile journey, right? So let's just dive in right away. I'm just going to bring to everyone's attention that right away, we start off with this idea of we. Notice it's not I. So it's not Jesuit saying, hey, it's me, it's we, which is really super interesting. So we come forth, we come forth throughout those, uh, which is really interesting. In the second paragraph, towards the end of that, the paragraph that starts off with we come forth, at the very bottom of it, it makes a statement which says, I love, we come forth to join with you, not from a place above or beyond you. And I think that's extremely important to understand that the way that the Jesuit and other enlightened beings look at us, they look at us like we're equals. And I know for me, that was kind of hard to wrap my mind around this idea that we're equal, but in truth, we are, right? And so it's just a matter of perception. And their perception is that we're equal to them. And so one of these things is raising your own awareness or your own self-perception to understand that in truth, we really are equal to them. And then in the rest of this thing, it says, but a place in which you already dwell eternally. You already are there, right? It's just a matter of there's a part of us that is kind of catching up, if you will. The paragraph that starts off, there's a place within you that is unbounded, eternal, invisible, incomprehensible to the world mind, incomprehensible to the sense of the body, but perfectly and even simply comprehensible in the silence in which the soul dwells. And I think that makes a very important distinction there. It's this idea of in the silence in which the soul dwells, right? And then it goes on to say in the following paragraph that starts off with all teachings, it goes on to say that this has one goal, to nudge the mind of the dreamer beyond his or her dream, to return that mind to a state of perfect knowledge. I love that. Awesome. In the paragraph that starts off with this transformation from a state of fear to love or from ignorance to enlightenment occurs for each mind within the dream in a very specific way. I constantly say that basically everybody's going to go through this thing a little bit differently. It's not always going to look the same. And that's why sometimes you're going to really resonate with something that even I bring up. And maybe sometimes you'll go like, yeah, not so much. That's perfectly understandable and normal, by the way. I love the next sentence. So it says, it must occur according to what is required to release the patterns that have settled into a particular mind. So in other words, the stuff that once you start going through this material, what happens is the whole goal with this is to basically shake you up and really get into the patterns that have settled. We all have patterns. We all have habits. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to break those patterns and break those habits. And that's what this course is. In the next paragraph that starts off with, therefore, the timing of your enlightenment, at the very last point is, can be brought to the attention and then released. So what are we doing? We're bringing up these beliefs that we're holding. We're shaking them up so that they can be brought to your attention. Again, we've got to become consciously aware of it. You know, if you hear me talk about it, I'm always talking about becoming aware of your beliefs and these patterns before they can be healed, transformed, and healed. So he talks about that, right? I love the next paragraph. That is why in the way of transformation, it's absolutely essential that you never compare your journey to anybody else's. Never compare, ever, 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 ever. Right? In the following paragraph, the ego always wants to compare and contrast. And at the very last sentence, it says, the point here is that the ego compares and contrasts and then draws a conclusion about its own worthiness, its own progress, its own state of illumination. And I just thought, isn't that true? Right? And we also think it's my way when it's not. It's not. It's your way. That is true. It's your way, but there's many ways. There's many ways, right? I love in the last sentence, in the last paragraph that starts off with, all this must be ego function. It says, enlightenment is but a decision away. That's it. A decision is away. And then it goes on to say, the decision entails but one thing: to release the insane valuation that you've placed upon everything and everyone, most especially yourself. Get off your back. Let it go. How about offering yourself some grace, some forgiveness, some compassion, right? And then the last sentence is, the decision rests on the willingness to take God at God's word. So there's some trust and faith in this process. And then I love the last one: rest on your willingness to cultivate silence. Yeah. Why do we cultivate silence? We cultivate silence so we can hear. We can hear what our soul is trying to tell us. We can hear what spirit is trying to tell us. That's how we cultivate silence. That's why we want to learn how to cultivate silence. And how do we do that? Meditation and prayer. Meditation and prayer. So in the next section, it's called an exercise in self-honesty, and it's a long section, but I think it's a powerful section and a powerful exercise. And so what happens is Jesuit gives you a list of questions to start asking yourself. And actually the exercise is asking for you to do this for the next 30 days. And so again, this is where the journal comes in really, really helpful. And there's a series of questions. I don't need to go through all the questions, but we're going to start asking ourselves this. And I highlighted some of the things in the section because, again, it's a long section, right? But I think that it really is, there's some really juicy points in this thing that I want to bring to your attention. And the one is, I've got a paragraph that starts off with, it does not, it's about, I don't know, about 6 or 7 paragraphs into that section. And it starts off with, it does not mean that it ceased to exist. And what we're talking about are these thoughts that are coming forth and being honest with ourselves, right? And so I think part of the section, the thing that really hits me hard and lands in my soul, is this idea that, like, look, thoughts are thoughts. We all have thoughts, and we're finally just acknowledging them. In other words, we're acknowledging our humanness of these thoughts. And I think it's really beautiful when it says it does not mean that that it ceases to exist. In other words, these thoughts. This has been the greatest error of religions as opposed to spirituality. Religion will give you a set of beliefs, ideas about yourself, standards that you must achieve. Still true. Thereby, the mind concludes that if I'm a spiritual person, I cannot be angry. If I'm a spiritual person, I don't have sexual fantasies about my neighbor. All of that is absolutely false. Pretty strong statement, right? And I would also bring up, again, I've done this before, but I'll talk about it, is this idea of spiritually bypassing. So it's like, oh, I don't have these thoughts. See, look at me. I'm happy. I'm not sad. I'm not depressed. I'm not having these thoughts. Because after all, I'm, I have these beliefs, and, I'm positive, when in truth you're not, right? And so now what it's doing is coming into touch, going into your heart, and just being open and honest with yourself about what's really going on, especially about these thoughts, which I think are just great. Later on down in the paragraph, it talks, the paragraph that starts, but remember, belief is not knowledge. And then it, in the sentence at the bottom of that paragraph, yes, well, just another thought arising, passing away in the domain. In other words, when he's talking about a thought coming up, I just had a murderous thought I had. Wow, check that out. And then the response to that is, oh yeah, I just had another thought arising and passing away in the domain. It does not change the truth of who I am. And I am free to extend love, or to hit him with a hammer. This is where I think Jesuit's humor is just outstanding. I just think it's hysterical. The next paragraph, the mind that is unconflicted abides in perfect vulnerability. In other words, it's willing to be completely honest. No, this is really what's going on inside of me right now. It has learned to embrace and accept the truth about the phenomenon of the mind itself in this dream world. A few paragraphs down, it starts with, learn to cultivate self-honesty. Though it sounds like a simple thing, this does take time, simply because the mind has used its power to be in denial about its own miscreations. Wow. It doesn't want to own them. It does not want to embrace them. It wants very much for you and itself to believe that it is really a very high spiritual being. ooh, well, I'm so spiritual, right? And it's like, no, you're not. Well, yeah, you are, but you know what I'm saying? It's in other words, like the ego, sometimes when people start in this trail, they start to get some of these new thoughts coming in and they think, well, look at me, you know, and it's like, look, we all have our own trash to take out, as the saying goes, right? So anyways, a couple of more simple things. There's a paragraph that starts off with, I love it. He starts talking about this idea of this, in the paragraph that starts off with, the mind always has the problem, but not the entirety of the mind. And then there's a sentence that says, quite frankly, it's like identifying with a pimple on the skin and then defending the pus within it at all cost. Ew, it's gross, but I think it's a fairly descriptive analogy, right? Silence is a doorway that will dissolve that pimple and that pus forever. Silence has arrived in many ways, but the principal cornerstone is deep self-honesty. So this is where a Jesuit starts talking about this idea of silence. Let's talk about silence, and let's talk about this idea of self-honesty. Is the greatest act of love that you'll ever experience within yourself. And it goes on to say in that paragraph, it says, and I love this, the embracing of deep self-honesty, the mastery of it, is the greatest act of love the mind can experience. For in perfect self-honesty, the world is transcended, fear is dissolved, enlightenment is presence. And in the enlightenment, there's a remembrance of the perfect innocence and the union with God. So, later down in the paragraph that starts off with, that is what creates tension, twisting of the rope. It ends up distorting everything. You end up being in judgment of yourself because you have in this example, a sexual thought yesterday, heaven forbid. You judge yourself. Again, where's the judgment of self coming from? It's not coming from God. It's coming from your ego. It's coming from your ego. So that's why no judgment, no shame, no blame, right? That's why I always say that. Let's see. A few paragraphs down, I love this. Getting to heaven is no longer an attraction. I love that. Bringing heaven to this world is. Bringing light to darkness is all that matters. Constantly desiring to bring greater light to your own darkness is the way in which you live, moment to moment, desiring greater light, and greater light. I love that. And then it goes through and asks a few more questions. Again, that's 30 days. More examples. I love I love the idea. The one paragraph that starts off with, I highlighted, says, it says, for you have returned to the sanity by merely confessing to the deepest part of yourself what has arisen and passed away within the lower mind. Yes, absolutely. All you're doing is you're just being honest. That's it. You're just being honest about what's going on in your mind. I love that. And then the last comment I'll make about the section is the paragraph that starts, this is at the very end of the chapter. It says, teach only love to yourself by loving that which you have hated and judged, by allowing yourself to feel and to know that which is passing through the mind, the body anyway. Embrace it. That's the thing. Embrace it. Don't be in denial about it. Don't forget it, but actually just simply embrace it. See your ordinary humanness. In other words, like, give yourself some grace. I mean, you're human, and this is part of the experience. So instead of denying what's going on and what really is happening inside of you, embrace it. I love that. And see the ordinary humanness not as an obstruction to peace, but as that through which peace can be extended. Yeah, because there's this really beautiful side of you. And yes, we have all of the other stuff going on as well. But certainly my experience in this process has been, my healing is by accepting all of it. So in other words, I think what happens is when we start to do this work, we look at parts of ourselves that we don't like, or things that we've done or whatever. And we start to judge those. Oh, I got to make this better. I got to make this better. I got to make this better. I got to get rid of this part of myself. And I would offer, instead of wanting to get rid of it, why don't you embrace it? Why don't you just love it and see the difference? See what happens. The last pair, and I'm just going to read this. Beloved friend, there's great depth and treasure awaiting you if you will put the message of this lesson into practice with passion, even zealousness, and with full commitment to your own Christedness, to see that you are worthy of the deepest honesty that you can reach, that you can confess, that you can live. For ultimately, the deep, honest truth is you and the Father are one. You are the Christ eternal. And I leave that with you. I hope you enjoy the lesson. Lots of work involved. See you next week for lesson 23, The Voice of Love. Have a great day now. Bye-bye.